pull away. Even further.
Kenneth McMillan is the principal choreographer of the Royal Ballet. He was born in Dunfermline in 1929, got himself to the Royal Ballet School, and at 17 became a founder member of the Sadler's Wells Theatre Ballet.
Are you going to clinch? Do you have time to clinch her? I mean, by accident, nearly happened. Was lovely. You got her, and she was lying at that side. I mean, I knew it weren't going to the next step, but if we could get that position. Time's going so quickly. You'll be holding. You're on point. Develope forward. Now, if you could just take that leg and go whoop. C, do, and D.
McMillan was himself a fine classical dancer, particularly noted for his leaps.
Yes, I wonder if when you went forward, you straightened the leg and back. No, back to the attitude, because you know you're in an attitude.
Bent, slightly bent.
So as he goes forward, you straighten it, come back to attitude, straighten.
Okay.
His first choreography dates from 1953.
You see, I can take you further.
His first partnership with Lynn Seymour took place in 1958 with The Borough, based on the Diary of Anne Frank. In 1960, he created a stunning interpretation of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. His 1965 production of Romeo and Juliet is regularly performed in repertory. Anastasia heralded his period as director of the Royal Ballet, succeeding Sir Frederick Ashton in 1970. His lively Elite Syncopations was premiered in 1974 to be followed by the tragic three-act ballet of The Story of Manon. His ballet Requiem, which was premiered by the Stuttgart Ballet in 1976, was introduced to British audiences earlier this month. Kenneth McMillan's work as a choreographer has been followed over the years by the ballet critic of the Financial Times, Clement Crisp.
McMillan is, in a sense, a beautiful erotic poet in movement. His pas de deux always explore a very strong sexual relationship.
Just show me the position again.
McMillan's concern has always been with the psychology of the characters, with the dramas, the tensions that impel them forward. He acts as a kind of analyst to his characters. He forces them into certain situations where they have to behave in a specific way. And he then shows us everything they feel in beautifully expressive movement. But it is movement which nevertheless stems from the classical tradition and really does have to do with classical ballet as such.
There's so much padding in the 19th century ballet. I mean, it's usually about thwarted love. The characters are very one-dimensional. It's a man and a woman in love and someone tries to break it up. And that's really the storyline. And it's padded out with endless dancing. But I didn't want that. I wanted a complete narrative. And to not put any padding in, to make every movement mean something to the audience. I wanted the audience to be involved, so much so that when they went home, they still believed those characters existed.
At the heart of each act of a 19th century full-length ballet was a pas de deux, a duet which centered around the female star. For McMillan, the action has been to turn this actually on its head, because he's made this ballet, which is a great central role for a male dancer. And we have not the expected 3 or 4 pas de deux that you have in the old ballets, but here we have, I think, no less than 7, which chart Rudolph's extraordinary relationships with the women in his life. In none of them is there any trace of love, not conventional romantic love. There is lust, there's despair, there's a kind of horrified passion. He reveals an enormous amount about himself, but McMillan is also very clever, and he reveals a great deal about the women whom Rudolph is involved with. For none of them does he feel anything other than anger or despair or a weird sort of gratification of a fantasy. He seeks, I suppose, he is a true romantic in that he seeks an ideal love. Never once does he find it. It is corrupted, it is destroyed, because he has been a corrupted and destroyed character. The first pas de deux that we see is a very brief one, in which he flirts at his own wedding reception with his new wife's sister.
The Princess Louise is danced by Genesia Rosato.
We next move to a pas de deux with the Countess Lariche, who's been his mistress at one time and is now a kind of evil genius. But she's also the only woman throughout the ballet who really understands Rudolph. She understands his physical needs and, in a sense, something of his psychological needs. Their relationship starts almost as a sort of kind of companionship, but it gradually darkens because she is forever making fresh demands upon him.
The meeting of Rudolph and Countess Lariche is seen by the Prime Minister Count Taff, who will rush off to report it to the Emperor.
think Rudolph was a great disappointment to Franz Joseph, who wanted someone in his own mould. And Rudolph wanted change. I mean, Rudolph was revolutionary in his way, but his hands were tied. In his thoughts, really. I mean, I think Rudolph saw the future of the empire, whereas Franz Joseph blinded himself to it.
Rudolph saw that it would have to break up.
That it ultimately would break up.
And he would have encouraged that, you think?
I think he would, and if he had become king. But like Edward VII, he knew that he wouldn't become king until he was really quite old. He allied himself very much to the Hungarian cause, which of course was frowned on by the court itself. And Rudolph was torn, I think, between duty and where his feelings lay. And he was very, very much drawn to the Hungarians, and I think they put pressure on him.
4 Hungarian officers at court tried to draw Rudolph into a conspiracy to secure Hungary's independence from Austria.
He was a very unhappy man, trapped by the stiff Habsburg court.
What did you find out about his childhood and adolescence?
Well, he was a very unhappy child. His grandmother, the Archduchess Sophie, wouldn't allow his mother to have access to him, which made her go away more and more from the court. He had very harsh tutors. One of them, in fact, locked him in an enclosure and told him that a wild boar was coming to attack. The child was in hysterics. He was only 6 at the time. He was made to get up very early and stand in the snow to harden him. His mother had married at the age of 16. She'd had a very happy childhood, a very free childhood, and she was in love with Franz Joseph. But the minute she got to the court, she was dominated by her mother-in-law, the Archduchess Sophie. Franz Joseph almost immediately began to have affairs, which his mother condoned. Elizabeth was very unhappy and very lonely. When she had her first child, she was told by the Archduchess that she wasn't really fit to bring up children, so they were removed from her. Rudolph was her third child and her only son. She left the court more and more.
Was there any love between himself and his mother? Were there any confidences? Was there any trust at all?
Well, apparently, he was never able to speak to his mother alone. She seemed afraid of contact.
Rudolph, on his way to his wedding night, to the wedding bed, goes to see his mother. It's the classic Hamlet Gertrude relationship that she is unable, through various psychological reasons, which Macmillan shows us in due time, she is unable to react to him at all. There is an extraordinary moment when he lays his head on her breast, and she raises her hands away from him as if she's reluctant to touch his head. She turns away from him with her hand on her hip. You see him how he inserts his head and his body as if to try and get back into his mother's arms. One of the most shocking and pitiable scenes.
Rudolph and his wife, with his parents and his in-laws, the King and Queen of Belgium. At first, Rudolph was delighted with the prospect of this marriage that had been arranged for him. But after a long engagement and 2 postponements, he changed his mind. On their wedding night, he terrorized his bride. This is the climax of the first act of Macmillan's Mayerling.
He was fascinated by guns and explosives all through his life, even from a little boy, and also fascinated by death. And to frighten his bride, he brought in a pistol and a skull. And after all, the girl was only 16 at the time. She must have been terrified. He had to produce an heir. He was trying to, so he forced himself to go to bed with his wife. And that's the point I started from.